Not sure why the video ended early, but that's all right. We will just jump right in and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a content publishing coordinator at Nexus Marketing, and I will be your moderator for our panel today. Our topic today is faith-based fundraising, strategies specific to faith communities. And as usual, before I introduce our panelists, I am going to do a few logistics. So to begin with, NXUnite is made in partnership with Nexus Marketing and is a new online community resource for the mission-driven industry. The NXUnite mission is to make introductions that lead to lasting relationships and serve as a hub of connection in the mission-driven sector. As you saw in our video on NXUnite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, cause-driven podcasts, and of course, panels with the likes of people with me here today. So today's hour-long panel is going to include time both for questions curated by my team, as well as questions from you, our wonderful audience. So at any time during the panel, please feel free to start adding questions to the chat, as well as to the questions tab of our kind of platform. If at any point you are having any technical difficulties or have any logistics, my team member Malou, who is under the Team NXUnite login, will be happy to assist. Just let her know in the chat and she will do her best to help. Okay. Before I introduce our panelists, I do also just want to thank you all for being here. I had a great time looking through our registration list and seeing all the amazing organizations that you represent. You guys are doing some really amazing work, and I'm very excited to have the chance to kind of share the expertise of our panelists with you today. All right, the introductions are finally here. So first, I'd like to introduce Karen Houghton of Infinite Giving, who is the CEO and founder. Infinite Giving is an automated investment platform bringing a better investing experience to nonprofits. She advocates for organizational sustainability through better financial management. By hedging against inflation, lowering endowment fees, and growing their asset giving, nonprofits can do more good work and help us all have stronger, healthier communities. Very excited to have you here with us today, Karen. We also have Diane Riemann of Major Donors. Named a top 25 fundraising consultant by Philanthropy Media in 2016, Diane G. Riemann, MBA, is the founder and president of MajorDonors.com, an acclaimed consultant and trainer. She founded MajorDonors.com 12 years ago to help small to mid-sized organizations with limited resources boost their revenues with an eye towards major gifts. Diane has been a nonprofit board member for the past 20 years. She most recently completed her 2 terms on the board of the Food Project based in Lincoln, Massachusetts. She is a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals and the Planned Giving Group of New England. Great to have you, Diane.
Thank you.
And Kenny Jang of Church Tech Today. Kenny is the editor-in-chief at churchtechtoday.com. He also leads a digital agency, Big Click Syndicate, helping mission-driven organizations create content with the purpose of nurturing raving fans for their mission. BCS has worked with the American Bible Society, Biblica, California Baptist University, Princeton Theological Seminary, Redeemer Presbyterian Church, the United Methodist Church denomination, and others. Kenny earned his Master's of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary, MBA from Columbia Business School, and BA from Duke University. Great to have you, Kenny. Awesome. We are going to get started, and it's time to finally hear from our panelists. So what I'd like to know first is, what is something you'd like to tell someone just kind of entering the world of finances at faith-based organizations? And as you answer, please feel free to add to your bio that I gave anything that we might have missed. So Karen, can I start off with you?
Sure. When we talk about finances for nonprofits, there's such a variable of where everyone who's watching right now may be starting. You may be in that very beginning scarcity mindset where you're month to month and you're not thinking 5 years or 10 years down the road. So there's several core tenets that we always encourage when you are seeking financial sustainability, which ideally everyone is, right? Because if you no longer exist, who is going to be helping the people and furthering your mission? So you need to be sustainable. So that way you're not in and out in those communities and potentially doing more harm than good. And so the first thing I always say is build up those operational reserve funds. After 2020, most of us felt that even more, whether you were able to dip into them or you wish you had them or you had them and now they are lower and you're building them back up. But pre-COVID, it was like a 3 to 6 month of operational reserves. Post-COVID, we're hearing a lot more about 6 to 12 months of operational reserves. And then make sure that you're putting them in a place where they're not actively losing value, such as in a bank account.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, Kenny, I'm going to turn to you. What would you share with someone new to this kind of world?
I would say that you're not alone, and it could be very overwhelming, especially when you're starting. But one of the things that I think in all of the coaching clients that we've worked with, if you can start to understand that this whole vocation, this whole activity is really all about just relationship development, one-on-one, and then you're just scaling one-on-one relationships, then it makes everything a lot easier and it makes a lot more sense. And then the other really practical, tactical tip is, I think everyone probably here on the panel will agree that this is, no matter when you start, this is the best time to start building your email list. As they say, money is in the list, and your list is really important. So there's not a better time than to start today.
Great. Thank you so much. And Diane, what do you want to tell someone just starting out?
So I'm going to talk about just starting out in the world of fundraising, not finance. And I'd like to make two overarching points. One is that Penelope Burke, and I'm going to mention a number of resources and I will provide them back to people at the end if you don't want to take notes. Penelope Burke has researched donors for decades, tens of thousands of donors. And what she's found out that donors want are three things consistently over the decades. They want to know they're part of a big idea that's important to them. Two, they want to know what their money's going to do quite specifically, and that you did it before you ask them again. And thirdly, they want to be thanked promptly and personally. And all those three, that sounds pretty easy, but the execution doesn't always happen. So that's an overarching frame. And the second frame I'd like to give is understanding where is the $4.85 billion that's given in this country each year coming from? Is it coming from individuals? Is it coming from corporations? Or is it coming from foundations? And if we had time, I'd do it in chat. But the answer is that 76% of the funds donated in the US are coming from individuals, with foundations a bit on the rise because we're seeing that accumulation of wealth and the building of more foundations, and corporate at the smallest at about 4%, with religious giving comprising about 30% of that pretty consistently. So frame. If you'd like to start in fundraising, I want to say welcome. What I think I'm doing is giving donors the opportunity to do something that's going to make them feel great. And I think what you need to do that are three things: persistence, curiosity, and taking the role of the advisor guide. You're not here to do some sort of money extraction. You're here to help people combine what they love and what their interests and what their values are with the work you're doing. And I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm actually going to stick with you, Diane, for this, starting off with this next question. And that's, how has the past 2 years impacted faith-based organizations? And what should faith-based organizations be doing to kind of move forward after these past 2 years?
I think how these last 2 years have impacted faith-based organizations and many organizations is it's really brought the importance of technology to mind. There's a study by Blackbaud, the State of the Faith Communities subsector, that was published in August 2020, and it does point out the increase in online giving that's being experienced. And yet I'd like to say, when we think about giving across the United States, most people hear about online giving and it's definitely rising quickly. But the reality is that we just hit 10% during COVID about the percent of total giving that comes online. So it's to say multi-channel, multi-channel, multi-channel. Certainly those direct mail and other contributions really matter. Secondly, I'd like to say wealth is concentrating. Well, and for better or worse, I'm not making any judgment. It is a fact, meaning we have more money in the hands of fewer people, and that is making both major gifts and planned giving, where we're having one-on-one conversations with our donors and getting to know them and really understanding what's important. And I want to say, in faith-based communities, I think some assumptions are made about what's important to a donor versus asking, meaning, is it the actual teachings that are most important to the donor? Is it the community being together with people that's most important to the donor? Is it the food bank or one of the other programs that you're running that's most important to the donor? And I'm not sure we always take the time to sort that out. And it's really important, especially as we're doing planned gift and major gifts. And when I say planned gifts, I mean legacy gifts, like gifts you can leave in your will. And last comment is 70% or so of all legacy or planned gifts are made in wills, which is something that any size faith-based organization can implement.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, Karen, I'm going to turn to you next. What do faith communities need to know about the past 2 years when it comes to endowment trends in particular, and how should this information kind of impact their present and future plans?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love what Diane said when you're talking about a movement towards technology and a movement towards, again, I'm going to come in with a financial hat in this too, but when we're talking about even what kind of gifting and the story that we're telling to donors. So I think too often when you go to an organization, a religious organization, or a charity's website and you go to donate, you're seeing a cash opportunity and they're asking you, they're saying, would you like to give $50 or $5? And that's okay. Every dollar counts, right? But when that is the only conversation happening in the digital footprint that you are putting out there for donors to find you, that becomes a problem. Because when you think about high wealth donors, where do they hold most of their wealth? It is often in the markets, right? So if you're holding the majority of your wealth in the stock market, which is how it often is, right, in different assets, but you're saying, I only want to give you a cash gift, then you're saying, hey, high wealth donors, we're going to make it really hard. Number one, our ask is really small for you. We're giving you only one option, maybe credit card or cash, right? And then it becomes a very manual process. And so when I talk about diversifying those donor asks, on our side, we often talk about accepting stock gifts, accepting cryptocurrency, and also accepting and asking for endowments. And so like 90% of nonprofits don't even have a brokerage account that allow them to receive stock gifts. And stock gifts on average are significantly larger than the average cash gift. So again, when we're talking about like, how do we get started, you need to set yourself up for success. And part of that is educating yourself on how can we meet donors where they are. You may think cryptocurrency is crazy, right? It's an outlier. It's maybe you don't understand it. Maybe you don't think it's a thing. I'm going to tell you, it's not going anywhere. And when you hear a lot of these buzzwords about crypto, I always say it's not the magic bullet. You're not going to be able to accept crypto and get $10 million, or maybe you are. But at the same time, it is, where is this going? And there are 21 million Americans who own cryptocurrency right now. And it has been proven over and over again. Fidelity even did a study that shows, generally speaking, it's a more philanthropic group than the average supporter and donator. So you're looking at these assets, and endowments are one of those same things. Like, how are you setting yourself up to easily accept stocks, to accept cryptocurrency, to talk about those things, and they don't have to be inaccessible. Endowments used to be only true endowments. They were, higher education has mastered endowments, right? They're amazing. Harvard has a $53 billion endowment. Good for them. I'm happy for them. Wonderful organization, but also they're good. Like, let's not keep giving them money, right? But what it tells you is that high wealth donors love the idea of legacy giving. It is the gift that they give once that continue to give generation after generation. But those true endowments are becoming less and less popular, because then you're like, well, I'm a small organization. Maybe I don't know where I am 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, or you have organizations who are locked in. So I always tell people, endowments are not for everyone. If you're still in that scarcity mindset and you haven't built up a strong operational reserves, those are your first priorities. But as you grow and you're starting to think long-term strategies and endowments, we're hearing a lot about quasi-endowments, micro endowments, and unrestricted endowments. That could be an entire webinar in and of itself, so I won't go too deep into that, but you should know that a quasi endowment is something where your organization can set that up, and it gives you flexibility where you're still investing it and pulling a disbursement off. But if 20, 30, 50 years down the road, your board and your needs change and they make a vote, you are able to still access that capital. And all of a sudden, the idea of endowment, you're like, oh, that's a fundraising tool. It's legacy. It's talking about financial sustainability. We're not going anywhere. All those are things that high wealth donors want. And now you're also able to be like, oh, would you like to gift? Yes, to our operations in this program, but give us also to our endowment. So unrestricted, quasi again, organization led, gives you flexibility to tap into that capital if you need. Micro endowment is the idea that you don't have to have $1 billion endowment to be impactful. Maybe you're endowing a scholarship, a position, a program, right? There are ways where that development person does not have to fundraise that thing every year over and over again. And the donor has the ability to say, hey, we gave this gift once and it's a legacy of giving, and maybe it's small, but we can add to it every year. I know of folks who've used our platform at Infinite Giving and they're like, hey, I only gave $50K for this endowment, but now it's a named endowment and they want to add $50K to it every single year. And so it becomes a really meaningful and impactful gift. And of course, unrestricted is the final one. And unrestricted means, yes, it is a protected endowment. And this is if it's a donor gifted endowment. They may give you $10 million. That's going to give you a $500,000 disbursement on average every year. You can actually use it for whatever you want. So they can make preferences known, but you're not, if they are wanting it fully restricted, you just need to educate your donor on what that means, right? But if they're like, we only want to fund XYZ program, well, maybe in 20 years, the community is shifted, the needs are shifted, and that's not where you need. So unrestricted means that, hey, we're going to honor your preference, but legally speaking, in our endowment agreement, we know that we can use this money to where it's needed most. And then it's just your job to relationally build into that and communicate those needs.
Great. Thank you so much. I love
it in a short amount of time. I know that's a big, we could go deeper into a lot of those, but I think asset giving and growing, that's really important.
No, I think that's a great kind of base set of knowledge to have. I already personally feel more informed. So thank you so much. Okay, Kenny, I'm going to turn to you. I've seen you've given a little quiz in the chat to people to give you a one line of what they do, which is awesome. But I wanted to ask you, again, these past 2 years have had a profound impact on all of us, but also our faith-based communities. What kind of needs to be considered when planning for the future?
Yeah, I think exactly what Karen and Diana was talking about is on spot on. I think even the last month I was talking to a pastor who they started accepting crypto, and the senior leaders was kind of like pushing back, saying this is a waste of time. How many people here really have crypto? How many donations are we going to get? We should focus our efforts and resources elsewhere. And yet that first day they offered, they got a gift of over $100,000. Now, depending on the size of your budget, that's either small or large. But hey, that's not bad for a first day appearance of a new option to add to the table. And receiving stocks and other funds like that, I think, is something that more and more churches really need to think about. There are even ministries that help with estate planning for free for churches. And of course, what happens is in estate planning, people put it in the will to give something to the church or to the nonprofit. So I'm totally on board with church leaders need to start to think a little bit more maturely or professionalized in this regard in terms of giving. We usually say for giving in particular that the offering time in a church service is the least strategic time that a pastor plans. Pastor will spend 20 hours, 30 hours on writing a sermon, but that offering time, they don't give 2 cents about it, right? So if you could just be a little bit more strategic, the leverage that you're going to get is amazing on funding your mission. And that's what it's about, funding your mission so you can do more for more people. So that's an encouragement I would love to just highlight, bold, underscore. How do we, if that's the one takeaway that everyone else has here is investigate the options and start to see what might happen if you embrace these new things.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Diane wants to build off that too. You go ahead, Diane, and then I'll jump in.
So I actually want to build off what both of you said. Because I work with smaller communities, I want to be clear that there are tools out there that make things easy. For example, accepting crypto, which sounds like, oh my gosh. Well, there are companies out there that will make it so you don't need a quote crypto wallet, which is the more sophisticated way to go about this. You don't have to do anything but sign up with this company. Obviously, there's a fee involved, but it is nominal compared to the average size of the gifts you're going to receive. So it's really understanding the resources too. When Karen was talking about, yes, we really need to look at assets. Most people have like 90% of their wealth in assets, not in cash. Well, there's a donor advised fund widget that you can put right under your donate button. I know of one from iMarket Smart. It's the most diverse one. There are a couple others out there. And so I think, again, there are these specific resources to help you do these more asset-based gifts that both Karen and Kenny were talking about.
Yeah, Infinite Giving will help you with crypto, stock gifting, endowments. Okay. We actually have a whole URL with a gifting page that does all these for you when you have a brokerage account. It's a shameless plug, but we can do all that for you too.
No, that's great.
One of the things that I when Kenny also was talking about churches, our director of business development, RJ Caswell, is a former executive pastor. He's led a large church and he works with a lot of our churches as well. And one of the things that we run into really often in the faith community is that they are not investing. And what that means is that you're looking at a group of individuals who are being called to responsible stewardship, and they may not be looking at investment in the way that it could actually help them. They're just fearing it and not understanding it. And so right now, what we're having a lot of conversations about with especially like elders in different churches is the idea of think about the parable of talents, right? Like that's the easiest go-to right there. Are you bearing it? Or are you looking at ways for it to grow? And we're not always talking about being risky, but having a balanced, intentional approach about growing what you've already been giving. Because if we believe that we're called to multiply our resources, the market in financial ways can be the best way to do that. And so we just have to remember not to make emotional decisions because we use investment practices as individuals every single day, right? If you have a 401k, if you have a 403b, then you are already investing. And the reason foundations, large churches, donor advised funds, charities are investing is because it is something that works when you're looking at long-term strategies. And so churches always have buildings, most usually, or that's a goal, right, is to own a building. And then what happens when you have worked really hard and your congregation has helped you build up operational reserves, and then you need a new roof or you need a new HVAC? All the time we talk to people who are like, hey, we planned for this, but because of inflation, right, now it's 9.1%. It's not going anywhere right away. Even in a really good economy, it's 2%. It's the target bank rate. A savings account is 0.06%. A money market, 0.1. So you are, whatever money you're putting away that you're bearing, right? If we want to use that, I know there's different ways to interpret that parable, but it always makes sense to me. It's like, oh, I'm bearing that treasure. And then when I go to need it, you have to fundraise again. So all the time we're talking to churches who are like, well, we have to fundraise again. We have to make another ask. We have to give more because now what costs this now costs this. Yet if you were going in the market and looking at that long-term average annual returns of a target 8%, then you're starting to look at it based on data. And there's conservative, responsible stewardship and opportunities to get into that market to hedge against inflation and make sure you're growing it in a very strategic way. So I always encourage people to think about that and think about how that parable is applying to your personal finances, but it can also and should be applied corporately, and look at those same principles for our charities and our congregations and religious organizations as well, because it's the easiest thing to take money from here and put it over here, and then you're not burying it. You have the opportunity for it to grow.
Great, thank you. All right, I do see there's some kind of conversations in the chat, questions about whether this is being recorded. This is being recorded and it will be automatically sent to your email after the session. Also, if other people you think would enjoy this, it will be possible for them to kind of register after the fact and watch the recording as well. So just quickly wanted to go in and say that. But Karen, thank you so much for sharing that. That actually in some ways predicts the question I was just about to ask you. So I don't know if you want to add any, maybe just a little bit more to it, but I was going to ask about leaders, because I know we have a number of kind of leaders of different organizations here today. How can leaders prepare for recession as well as innovate by accepting stock and cryptocurrency like we've been talking about already?
I think there's a lot of talk about recession, right? And if you are fundraising, right, even when you talk about inflation, all of this directly impacts fundraising, right? So we are like, all right, staff, how do you love on your staff and make sure that they are able to put their food on the table? How are you compensating for that? And sometimes it just simply goes to more pressure on your team to fundraise more money. So I always say, what tools are we giving them? What support are you providing as a leader to help engage them and make sure that your organization is sustainable? So preparing for recession, we also usually, again, talk about operational reserves, capital reserves. Like, are you able to build those up? They are meant for, like, they're your long-term savings accounts, right? And you don't put long-term savings in a bank, right? So you think about, well, where can we do it? Where should we invest it? Again, I'm talking about highly diversified, very conservative portfolios that you can hedge against inflation. But there are ways to do that. Reducing expenses. And I don't mean by laying off team members, right? So we need to love on them and support them during these times. But like, where can you reduce expenses? For organizations that do have endowments, usually one of the first things I look at is, like, even as their investment advisor, I'm like, what are your investment fees? What are you paying these third-party vendors? Are you paying high transaction fees? You want to receive crypto? Are you having to pay a subscription? If you are, is that worth your potential one? I usually say, well, wait. And then if you have somebody, then figure it out and have everything lined up, ready to go. So there's a lot of ways where you reduce expenses, build those reserves, and start thinking about, how you can bridge that gap that you're going to need to have financially. And a lot of the ways is working with your donors, telling that story and giving them multiple ways to give. So again, like, stock gifting might not mean anything to you, but you probably have a donor that if they were educated, then that gives them a great opportunity because they're avoiding long-term capital gains, which is like a 37% tax, which means they also are giving you a larger gift. The market is clearly down, but at the same time, they can also give you those stocks and then file for that loss. And that is also strong tax savings. So there's some education, I think, that allows you to get bigger gifts and allows you to meet your donors where they are.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, Kenny, I'm going to turn to you. What do you see as the role for leaders in fundraising? I know you already mentioned kind of during the actual service, how they can get involved with donations, but I'd love to hear more. Yeah,
I think, first of all, I would say, and this is even more important during a recession, is, are you as a leader, do you have your own personal finances in order? Like, this is the time to actually lead by example and also remove the stress that the broken personal finances might have on actually carrying out your duties when something hard is coming through in terms of a difficult season. So that would be the first thing, is like, I think we need to sometimes not forget that you are a person as a leader yourself, and you need to follow through and doing what stewarding your finances is just one of the most important things. I think the other one is to, obviously, you are leading your team, whether it is staff members, elders, key volunteers, and even high capacity donors that are part of your like so-called family and informal leadership of your church. I think that role of leading them is really important, where you need to be extra crisp on your vision and the mission that you guys are trying to accomplish, whether it's a church or a nonprofit ministry. That the more clarity that you can provide in what your organization is supposed to focus on in this next season, that helps everyone have much more confidence in terms of what they're supposed to be doing, and getting a sense of how things are going, so that everything doesn't spiral out of control.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, Diane, how do you see leadership and leaders should be involved with the kind of fundraising aspect of faith communities?
So I do want to start reaffirming what Karen and Kenny said, which is it's really important to think of leadership as people and them making sure they're okay, and that their staff and their community is okay. So just putting that out there. I think it's also based on what Kenny said, the way I say it is making sure that the messaging is clear. I think they really need to lead on messaging, so everyone is saying the same thing, and we're very clear about what our, let's say, 3 priorities are, not our 10 priorities. Our 3 priorities, a good number for donors. It's enough to make a decision, not enough to confuse. Are going forward, I think they need to be actively involved in the ask process with major donors. And I have trained actually a number of rabbis, and there's often natural skill there, and it's a question of maybe adding a couple little techniques in, and also how they want to work with their team, and also looking at the technology that we can use to identify our top donors. I know it can be controversial in some communities, but the fact is that there are tools out there, commonly called wealth screenings, that can help us identify who our top donors might be in terms of having financial resources. We may see some of their philanthropy, and that can help us prioritize if we're a larger community. So using those kinds of tools at the major gift end, and then at the other end, it's making sure the technology is in place for the team for things like crowdfunding, et cetera. So making sure we're really on the current technology path. And the last thing I want to say is making sure there's a strong thank you program. I said that first comment, what are the top 3 things? The most overlooked one is thanking. There's tons of research on how a call and a handwritten note done shortly after a gift is made make a huge difference. And the leader does not have to make all those calls, but it is ensuring that the team and potentially some volunteers are really thanking people in what, I'm not sure it's so gloom and doomy, but in what may be recessionary times. Thanking and retention get even more important. And we don't have a great track record in this country on retention. And so that is a place where a leader can really implement some strategies to help, at least let's keep the donors we have.
There's such a beauty to that when you just think about the basics of relationships, like even what y'all have both said in the beginning. Like I think generally people want to be known, right? We and it's not always this flashy, I need a lot of credit for a donation, but I would say even like when I give, like I'm sure we're all philanthropic in our own rights. Like a note that's just like, we saw it, we're grateful, thank you, it is so meaningful. And when you don't get those, or things fall through the cracks or systems happen, I mean, we've all probably have stories that we have heard or experienced where that's very catastrophic to that donor relationship. So it's just think about what you would want to receive if you had been giving, some of your talents or resources. And sometimes just a sincere thank you goes such a long way. I agree so much.
And there's really, to say technology again, there's some really great little video tools. And again, the idea is not to be polished. You just can hold up the note. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you so much, Kenny. It's just that little extra touch. Videos get open at a very high rate. So there's lots of things out there now that one can do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We actually have a whole panel dedicated to thanking our donors coming up.
Good.
So if this is a topic you're interested in, if you're interested in those little videos, I'm going to do my own shameless plug and say we have an upcoming panel on that, and I hope you'll join us. So Kenny, I'd like to turn over to you, but before I actually ask the next question, I want to remind our audience that we're about to shift over to the time where we're going to answer your questions. So please feel free to start dropping questions in the chat or again in the questions tab. We'd love to make sure we're addressing the topics you're most interested in. But Kenny, first I'm going to ask kind of about the role of technology. I think we've already been touching on it a little bit, but I believe this is a personal passion of yours. Is what can kind of technology do to boost our faith-based organizations?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's simple things like video-based tools. I just put one version, one tool out there in the chat. And then there's newfangled things, artificial intelligence that actually is here today to help us do that. I actually think on the NXUnite site, there was a really good article recently about all the different things that AI can do for you. We can find it and put it in the chat. I think for us and our team, what we try to coach is that, again, it's one-on-one relationships, and all we're doing is using technology to scale personal relationships. And just one basic example is when you sit down to write an email blast to your list, are you writing to one person on the other side, or are you writing to a crowd? Because the person who receives it is receiving and saying, who are they talking about? There's only one person here. I'm the only person in the room. And yet you're being treated like cattle. And that is literally not the point of email marketing tools, right? No one woke up today on Wednesday saying, hey, I need another email list that I want to be a part of and be treated like cattle. Like no one actually woke up today for that, right? And so I think that is the number one thing that you have to push against is you can't lose the humanization and the personalization of the communications. Once you do, everything's lost. And I think this is like, it's easy to casually dismiss, but that is the entire point of almost all the technology tools that are at our disposal for donor development, fundraising, and communications.
Absolutely. I love the idea of making sure that we're keeping the individual donor in mind. So
yeah, I mean, again, like Diane talked about the videos. There's tools like I put in SendSpark. There's Bonjoro. There's Dub. And the point of these tools is that you could easily, like, again, this is what's great about our economy today is that there are startups that are making like it's single focused on doing something really well. So there are these apps that allow you to in mass just go one by one, quickly record a personalized video so that I can say, hey, Diane, hey, Karen, right? Hey, Colleen. And then literally it ships it off. And within an hour, you could literally put out over 100 videos that are personalized. The power of someone's name or context or that message is so much more powerful than if you just write a mass email to everybody or a direct mail postcard to everybody, right? And so this is the type of thing that we have at our disposal now. It is possible. It might seem overwhelming, but it really isn't. And most of these things, it's kind of like what my mom told me growing up. It's like cooking is not that hard. It's usually the recipe is written on the can or the box, and you just have to sit down, take the time to just read the instructions and try it once, and then you're off to the races. And so that would be my encouragement. Most of this technology has been democratized that almost anyone on your team can actually start to embrace one step at a time. Incremental gains is what you want to go for. So I would just encourage you to start joining communities like this, right? And trying to just learn word of mouth or go to forums and Facebook groups and webinars and pick up tools and just test them out, because version 1 is better than version none. You're not going to get any results if you don't do anything. You can't sit on on your butt and just think that things are going to happen. Version 1 is better than version none.
Definitely. I love that we've also had a cooking lesson in this. And now I'm going to be I'm waiting for the first nonprofit that I donate to that's going to send me a personalized video. I'm waiting with bated breath for that. Okay, Diane, I'm going to turn to you. What advice do you have for faith communities when they're kind of dedicating time to tech upgrades and deciding where to spend the time making that tech upgrade?
I think at their two ends. I mean, my company is majordonors.com. So I'm, of course, really focused on, when I say individual, I'm talking about literally visiting one-on-one or Zooming one-on-one with individuals. And I do want to point out that Zoom has proven amazingly effective for major gift work. During COVID, my clients just raised just as much, if not more money, 100% on Zoom. With converting to that, you have to be able to tell your story and get your donor involved telling their story as part of the process, but it was very, very effective. So I think at the other side is the growth of crowdfunding, about which I don't know a lot, but I see it happening, and I see a lot of very successful crowdfunding campaigns to use to both attract more donors, keep your donors, get your donors excited. So it's really using the technology to both expand, and then it's to go deeper, making sure you're tracking all of your major donor communications. You see what they're opening. So you really are learning more and more and more about your major donors. And also artificial intelligence has entered the donor fundraising platform universe, where we can get more information appended to our donor records. That will help us as we move forward, in particular with our top donors, but with all donors. The more you know about what they're interested in, the better you're going to be. And let me cite Russell James, professor from Texas Tech, who has done some research, and he's showing that in terms of donors want to know what their money's doing, even on a general appeal, if you give donors a list of choices, a huge percent won't pick a choice. They'll say use it where it needed most, but they gave 40% more. Why? Because they can now picture what their money was going to do. And so to the extent we're using technology to allow us to picture what our money is going to be doing, all good. And personalizing, all good.
Great.
I love that we keep talking about like the relational side of technology, because I think too often people just assume that's impersonal. I don't want tech. I can't, like, they think of it as impersonal. And I think especially in faith-driven communities, it's so important to have that relationship really across all, philanthropic movements, but at the same time, like being able to leverage technology in these really meaningful ways. I think it's important to highlight that we can't be scared of it, that there's pretty much a solution for almost all of your pain points that exist out there. It's, to Kenny's point, like trying it, right? You got to try something and do that, and that it can help you build transparency. Because I think when we talk about, especially the giving environment in today, it's accountability, it's transparency, and it's telling that story from this very personal relational approach. And technology can help us do all those things really well.
Great. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to move to a speed round of questions from our audience, because we have a lot and I can just tell there's too many things to address. So I'm going to kind of direct each question to one of you as panelists. If you want to add kind of a quick addition, definitely do, but we're going to try to kind of knock out a few. So Kenny, I want to direct this first one to you, which is, how do you recommend personalizing an e-blast? This is a question from our audience.
Absolutely. I put an article in the chat, but there's so many ways. So the first one is by names. Everyone loves to hear their names, right? That's the first thing. Second one is most email platforms allow you to use what's called tagging. Basically, you can sort the people on your list into different buckets, and it's your choice of how you sort. But, it's a very basic one might be people in a women's ministry versus a men's ministry. You might have two different tags and two different sub lists. And then you can start to personalize the type of stuff that you send out to each sub list. There's techniques of using links within emails to basically provide a choose your own adventure, and then start to send them different types of responses based on what they click on. So there's many different ways that you can do that, content wise, demographic wise, etc. But the first way to start, again, is I would go to your email platform that you're using, whatever it is, and almost certainly they're going to have some sort of training or FAQ. Most of them have video, and some have even actually full-blown courses online right now on how to use your specific email platform and start to personalize those messages.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, our next question, I'm going to direct to you first, Karen, but happy to have other people jump in. It's a little bit long, but it says, we have cash set aside in our bank account, but we understand we're losing money by doing that. Where would be a good place to start for a small nonprofit like us, investing and doing the things mentioned today? So kind of a place to start when you're a small nonprofit that might not have a ton of time or resources to dedicate.
Well, I would suggest going to infinitegiving.com, because we were made for small to mid-sized organizations, and we provide, so whether us or somebody else, but generally what we found, which is why we created Infinite Giving, is that when you're a small organization, it's really hard to get people to call you back, right? So it's like, why I've literally talked to people who are like, I just want to open a brokerage account and we only have 50K, or we only have 25K or 100K, but we want to invest, and people won't call us back. And that's very common. And so that's one of the problems that we wanted to solve, is we were like, everyone should have access to this. Why is it difficult? It's the smaller organizations need the same kind of help growing financially, sustainability. Like, it shouldn't just be about the large organizations. So I would affirm that it can be hard, that I'm sure there are other people out there who will take smaller accounts. We're built for nonprofits, small to mid-size. So kind of that 50 million and under. Our minimum investment's 25K. But as far as your investment strategy, wherever you choose to go, highly diversified. So, right, you never want to hold 100% Tesla stocks. I know that's basic. You probably know that. But we talk a lot about, especially for kind of early investment strategies, making sure that you're doing ETFs or index funds, just because that diversifies even more. And then you want to do a balance of securities and fixed income. So generally for reserve funds for new folks, we recommend a 30-70 allocation of ETFs and index funds. The other two small things that I would say is I would highly recommend not having someone on your board invest those for you. So it's a conflict of interest. It can get really complicated. Yes, you can do it if you have all your proper disclosures to your donors and everybody else in place, but I could spend an hour telling you scenarios of why that's a really bad idea. So all that to say is they can help you choose who you would like to invest your funds. You can go through an RFP process. You can do all of that, but I would strongly encourage you to not allow your board to manage those funds. They should be the oversight to the person who is managing those funds.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Diane, I don't know if you have any things you want to add to anything that's been said, but also we have a question about kind of where to find AI options, and I think just kind of technology in general for nonprofits or churches or faith-based organizations. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that too.
Well, some of the artificial intelligence in terms of fundraising is attached to what I'll call the wealth screening companies. So you see Donor Search starting to add it. You see iWave starting to add it. You see Wealth Engine starting to add it. There are new platforms coming out all the time, but that's a good area to look, because what are we doing? We're taking sort of your current donor list, and we're adding more information. I just also want to support what Kenny was talking about. He used the word tagging. I, from the marketing space, would use the word segmenting. A key concept I just want to reinforce: segmenting your donors and sending them information specific to them. AI helps with that too, as does all of the technology. So I'll stop there.
This is a total personal preference. I can't quote any research for it right now too, but for Kenny and Diane, I'm sure y'all would probably agree. Tell me if you do or don't. But we were talking a lot about communication and email communications. right? Generally, we can hold someone's attention for just a few seconds, right? Before they go to the next thing. And one of my biggest pet peeves is when you get emails that are like this, because no one will read them. So when you send an email, I know you have all sorts of wonderful things that you want to say, but the less you say, the more likely it is that someone will read it and it will have a greater impact. So even like in personal emails, I always challenge people. I'm like, it should be 5 sentences or less. It's arbitrary, like don't get caught up on that, but it is a nice challenge to be like, and of course, email marketing is different, but just think about your donors are really busy, but they do care. So how can you relationally build it, but make it as concise as possible in your communication?
Or I would say some donors actually like to read. Make it skimmable.
Yes.
Skimmable. You have to understand who your donors are. Some donors really do like to read. This applies absolutely for newsletters. When people are sending out either paper or e-newsletters, you need to have headers and subheaders such that donors can read them. And I also want to point out, because we're talking about now communication in general, the difference between corporate and nonprofit communication is corporate is we did this and we did that, and this is key, and it takes a long time to get. Donor communication is you did this and you did that. And a simple strategy is to count the number of yous versus we's in your communications, and the yous should outnumber the we's. So that's just a little overall communication tip.
And Diane, just to clarify for everyone listening, when you're saying the word you, you're not talking about you as in the people listening here today. You're literally saying the Y-O-U, that word you should be using that word in your language, right?
Correct. So again, when we think about corporate and as organizations, we also often like to, we started a food pantry during COVID. Even though it's not literally true, potentially what donors respond to, you started a food pantry during COVID. Thanks to you, we were able to. It's a very, very, very different mindset. I refer you to Tom Ahern, A-H-E-R-N, nonprofit communication expert, who will expound upon this concept and does in multiple blogs, books, etc.
Fantastic. I think we could go on for 3 or 4 panels, just the 4 of us, and I wish we could. But unfortunately, I do have to wrap us up for the day just so we hit our hour mark that we said we would. But if your questions have not been answered, the people in the audience, I do really encourage you. We're going to send out a survey after this panel to please fill it out and let us know so we can plan future panels to address those topics. It also asks you a few other questions about whether you had any technical difficulties with registration, which we would also like to hear so we can make sure that it's smoother the next time. So please fill that out. I think it also will be dropped in the chat, but you should also receive it in an email after the panel. So I've had such a wonderful time, and I don't want it to end. So I'm going to give each panelist a second to do a kind of very quick closing sentence remark that you want to give to our audience before we leave them today. So Diane, would you start just a very quick send off?
Get to know your donors. Giving is good for your health. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Karen?
Yeah, you're not alone in this, that you have a lot of resources. And I guess I would just say thank you for the work that you're doing to make our communities a better place. And we would all love to serve you if we can be of help in any way.
Great. And Kenny?
I would just focus on incremental gains. You can't do it all at once, and it's a journey. You're not going to perfect it anytime soon, or maybe not anytime ever, but we are always iterating for the better. And just pick one thing that you might have caught today, just one, and try to explore that and make some progress in that in the next 30 days.
Absolutely. Fantastic. All right. With that, we've reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights today. I know if we were in person, there'd be a big round of applause, but for now, just know that I'm sending that to you. I also want to thank everyone who attended today's panel. I hope you enjoyed yourself and learned something. And as Kenny said, found something that you can kind of action on today. We have a packed summer and fall of panels, so I hope you will join us for future ones. This month, we have panels focused on association leadership, nonprofit IT, alumni engagement, website design, and more, and we're adding more, it feels like, every day. So keep an eye out on those on the NXUnite website, as well as the NXUnite LinkedIn, and the registration for many of those are already live, so you can sign up and then kind of forget about it until you get the email reminder. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be sending out that survey. Please remember to fill it out if you have time. And otherwise, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.